John Steenhuisen says a Terbufos pesticide is strictly intended for agricultural purposes and must not be used by individuals who are not certified or authorized. He also confirms that the product is not locally produced but is imported from a neighboring country or neighboring countries which has yet to be identified. The Minister now joins us for the chat. Minister, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. I just need clarity on this particular part, Minister, before we deal with the investigation. I understood you to have said during the press briefing that there are 5 licenses or 6 licenses that have been issued for the manufacturing of Terbufos, and only 5 of those licenses are active. Is that the case?
That is the case. There are 6 authorized and licensed producers and distributors of Terbufos in South Africa. Currently, only 5 of the 6 are performing their activities. The one has ceased import or distribution of Terbufos in the country.
Okay. So what have you found through your investigation?
Well, we've been subjecting the samples that have been found at a variety of the locations around the country to independent laboratory testing. Those laboratory tests have confirmed that the Terbufos that has been found in the swabs and in the confiscations does not match Terbufos that's manufactured by any one of the 5 particular companies concerned. 4 of the 5 companies, there's no match whatsoever in terms of color and makeup of the substance. And the 5th one, the scientific markers in it do not match any of the samples that have been found, which indicates that it's clearly not something that's coming from within South Africa. These manufacturers, as well as the supply chain, are monitored incredibly closely by the Department of Agriculture in terms of making sure that this restricted use product does not find its way out of certified hands and into the general public.
Yeah, so which means that there must be importation of the Terbufos, and at this particular point you can't say from which country it could be.
It's hard to say which country it is at this stage, but there are investigations currently underway. Obviously, it's very important to get on top of this. The other big marker about why it's unlikely that this is produced locally is that in many of the instances, it's been found with a similar pesticide called Aldicarb. Aldicarb was banned in South Africa for both production and distribution in 2016. But Aldicarb is readily available in countries, for instance, like Zimbabwe and others. And so it is likely that the 2 are coming in together from one of the neighboring countries. The quantity and the spread that we've seen around the country indicates as well, Eldrin, that this is not something that's coming in a backpack over a border. It looks like there is a network of distribution coming in through a port of entry. And that's why the next part of the investigation is to turn to those ports of entry to see where potentially these harmful substances are making their way into South Africa.
Yep. And officials from the ports of entry would know that this is a banned substance and shouldn't be allowed into the country.
Indeed, and it is what's called a restricted use product. It can only be bought in, and the ingredients for it can only be bought in under the very strictest of licenses, and that's monitored by the Department of Agriculture. And so they would be very much aware of the fact. Aldicarb, as they would also be aware, is a completely prohibited substance. You may not own, possess, or distribute it in South Africa, given the fact that it was banned in 2016. So the focus now, as I said, is going to turn to the Border Management Agency, the Department of Agriculture, and various other agencies, including SSA, to examine the ports of entry where there could be potential importation taking place and to clamp down on it coming into the country from there.
Yeah. Have you started having any conversations with your counterparts in neighboring countries just to find out how they're dealing with this issue? If, for instance, in Zimbabwe, it is readily available, how this could have had an impact on Zimbabwean nationals? Are we seeing the same amount of deaths, for instance, when it comes to children buying stuff from local tuck shops in Zimbabwe or any other neighboring country?
Well, we haven't started a formal discussion yet because what we want to do is try and clamp down on how it's entering South Africa. Once we know that, we'll be able to work backwards from there to the point of origin. I've indicated the name Zimbabwe only because of the presence of Aldicarb, but it could well be coming in from any number of countries on the continent being imported in. There is also a likelihood that, given the fact that it is no longer in use in the European Union, that you could have a instance where some manufacturer or stockpile of it is making its way onto the continent through there. So it's better to be led by the data and led by the science. And so once we're able to determine the type and the potential source of it, I think we can start the engagements with neighboring countries about how we tighten up the borders. Obviously, it's a very difficult thing to control, and we're going to really need the public's assistance in this in terms of education about how dangerous it is, but also to help us clamp down and find out where it is being sold and distributed so that we can trace steps backwards to be able to get to the perpetrators of the importation.
Yeah. So there's a group of organizations, including the South African People's Tribunal on Agrotoxins, that are calling for a ban on Terbufos. What's your response to this and the impact that something like that could have on the agricultural sector?
Well, obviously, the Department of Agriculture reviews continuously the agro pesticides that are in use in South Africa. Where science and data shows that these are problematic, we move to remove them from the use in South Africa. As early as the 1st of November, I issued an order to ban a number of substances. But this generally only takes place after wide consultation in the industry. Terbufos is widely used in the citrus, potato, as well as various and the maize sector. And what you need to do is be very careful if you don't have a sufficient substitute, that you don't end up then compromising food security through failed crops, which will also then harm us economically in terms of exports. But obviously, we will continue to monitor this. But I think the fact that we're still finding Aldicarb on the streets in South Africa shows that banning is not necessarily a silver bullet to be able to deal with these things. It comes down to enforcement, detection, and making sure that we clamp down on particularly ports of entry to stop the flow of illegal substances into South Africa.
Yeah, and with the inspections that are taking place at the various tuck shops and the re-registration of the tuck shops, what's the role of the Department of Agriculture when it comes to that particular element?
Well, the Department of Agriculture has formed part of the Joint Task Team involving Border Management Authority, State Security Agency, as well as the SAPS and the Department of Health, that are conducting a joint operation to visit these institutions. Act 36 of 1947, which governs farm remedies, gives the Department of Agriculture an inspection power. That is usually done over the supply chain of the particular agricultural products to regularly make sure that they're being stored correctly, that they're only being in line with the protocol dealing with RUPs, restricted use products, are only being given to registered practitioners in the agricultural sector. And so obviously that will have to continue, but they are forming part of the Joint Task Team that's currently going around the country to try and track and trace the source of these particular agrochemicals.
Okay. Minister, finally, your Chief of Staff, Roman Kabinek, what's happening with him?
How did I know you were going to ask that, Eldrin?
No surprise at all.
None at all.
Yeah. So what's happening with Roman?
Well, there's a live HR process underway, so I don't want to go into any details. But as you know, I did ask him to step down. He has refused, and we have to now follow the labour law process to ensure that that contract is terminated.
Yeah. Do you know how long something like that could take?
Well, I'm finding out that government labour law moves a lot slower than traditional labour law. But as I said, it's a live HR process, so I'm quite reluctant to comment on it until that is concluded. But I certainly hope sooner rather than later.
Okay. Is it doing any work for you now in your department?
Not for me. Not for me. I've got, as I've said in the statement I issued on the weekend, there's a number of other support staff members who are providing the support that I need.
So what does he do now?
As I said, I don't want to go into this. Is a live HR process underway, and I think that Once that is concluded, I'll be able to answer you more fully in terms of the last few weeks and months.
Sure. I'm just asking in terms of work, what is it that he's doing? Because he's not on suspension, right?
No, he's not on suspension.
Yes.
But,
so work-wise, like today when he comes to work, what does he do?
He's not currently at work. He is dealing with some of the lighter administration matters, but certainly does not involve anything that relates to my day-to-day work as the minister. I have a number of other staff members who've been appointed to assist me with that, and we are continuing with that work while we wait for the HR process to unfold.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. That is the Minister of Agriculture there, John Steenhuisen. This is on the work that the department is doing.